The porch creaked beneath the weight of memory. James Thornton, 65 years old now, settled into his rocking chair as the June evening painted the Montana sky in shades of amber and rose. His granddaughter, 8 years old, knelt in the grass below the steps, struggling with a brass compass that had seen 3 generations of hands. Emma, 29 now, and mother of 2, crouched beside the child with the patience of someone who had been taught the same lesson long ago. Jim sipped his coffee, watching them. The metal glinted in the fading light, and something in that flash of brass pulled him backward through 20 years like a fishhook in the soul. Folks still ask why I paid $50 for a child nobody wanted, he said aloud, though neither woman looked up. But that 50 wasn't a purchase price. It was the cost of redemption. Emma glanced back at him, smiled that knowing smile she wore when he started telling the old stories. Her daughter tapped the compass 3 times, gentle as a prayer, just as Emma had taught her. Just as Robert Sullivan had taught Emma all those winters ago. "Tell it right this time, Papa," Emma called. "Tell them how scared you were." Jim closed his eyes. The Montana breeze carried the smell of cut hay and approaching rain. But in his mind, he smelled wet wool and coal smoke, felt the January cold that no stove could touch. "Scared doesn't cover half of it," he murmured. And then he was there again. January 1883. 45 years old and still running from ghosts. The auction house stank of desperation and winter. 15 below zero outside, but the cold that mattered had nothing to do with temperature. It seeped from the walls, from the silent crowd, from the small figure standing on the platform, like she was awaiting execution rather than adoption. Emma Grace Sullivan, 9 years old, drowning in a dress 3 sizes too large, clutching something that clicked against the buttons of her threadbare coat every time her hands shook, which was often. The auctioneer cleared his throat for the 3rd time. His voice cracked when he spoke, not from emotion, but from the smoke that hazed the room like low-lying fog. "Folks, the town cannot keep housing her. Someone has to take responsibility." 3 families had climbed those steps. 3 families had examined her the way you'd examine livestock at a county fair. Checked her teeth, asked about her constitution, inquired whether she carried disease. 3 families had descended those same steps without a word, disappearing into the crowd like water into parched earth. The girl stared at her boots. They were too big, as well stuffed with newspaper to keep them from sliding off. She tried not to cry, because crying made people turn away faster. She had learned that in 4 months at the church basement, 4 months since typhoid had taken her parents and left her with nothing but a brass compass, and the memory of her father's voice teaching her to read the land. In the back row, leaning against a wall that wept moisture, despite the cold, Marcus Sullivan checked his pocket watch. County land assessor. Blood uncle to the girl on the platform. Waiting. Not waiting to claim her. Waiting for everyone else to leave. The auctioneer's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "Last call. Anyone?" The crowd shuffled toward the door. Boots scraped on warped planks. Someone coughed. The stove popped and hissed. Then a voice cut through from the doorway, deep and certain as bedrock. $50 cash. Every head turned. Snow blew in as Jim Thornton stepped through shaking ice from his coat like he was shaking off hesitation itself. 45 years old, cattle rancher from the northern ridge. 3 weeks of isolation still clinging to him like a second skin. Marcus Sullivan's smile died so fast it might never have existed. Jim walked forward. His boots echoed on the platform steps, each footfall a commitment he could not take back. 6'1" shoulders broadened by decades of labor, a scar running down his right forearm visible even through his wool shirt. Hair brown but silvering at the temples. Eyes gray as January sky. The auctioneer blinked. "Mr. Thornton, you are certain." $50. Jim pulled bills from his vest money earned from the fall cattle sale. Crisp despite the cold, despite being carried close to his heart for 3 weeks. "Cash money right now." Papers rustled. A pen scratched across documents. The sound seemed obscenely loud in the sudden silence. Jim signed his name in the careful script his wife had taught him 30 years ago, back when the world still made sense. The girl stared at him like he might vanish if she blinked. Her hands tightened on that brass object, whatever it was, until her knuckles went white. When the auctioneer nodded, Jim offered his hand. Not grabbing, not demanding, just offering. Emma looked at it for 5 full seconds. In those 5 seconds, Jim saw her measure him, assess him, decide whether this stranger was better or worse than the uncertainty she had lived with for 4 months. Then her small fingers, cold as river stones, settled into his palm. The brass thing clinked again. Up close, Jim could see it was a compass, old, worn, smooth by use with initials carved into the casing. RS 1871. Outside, he lifted her into the wagon. She sat rigid on the bench, that compass clutched tight enough to leave impressions in her skin. The horse knew the way home. It always did. 20 minutes of wind and creaking leather passed before she spoke. "Why did you pay for someone nobody wants?" Her voice barely carried over the storm. Jim kept his eyes on the road, on the familiar ruts hidden beneath new snow. "Seems to me you are wanted just fine now. You do not know me. Do not need to." The wind howled through another mile of silence. Then she spoke again, and this time her voice held something sharp, something that cut through the cold, like truth through comfortable lies. "My uncle came to see me at the church basement 3 times, said he would take care of everything." She touched the compass, protective. "He wanted this. Papa's surveying tool. I would not give it." Jim's jaw tightened. The reins creaked in his grip. "Your Uncle Marcus Sullivan." "Yes, sir. He came to see me, too." Jim guided the horse around a drift that had not been there that morning. 3 days ago, offered me $100 to stay away from that auction." The girl's head snapped toward him so fast her neck must have ached. "Why would he do that?" "Good question." The ranch appeared through the snow. Low house built from Douglas fir barn with 20 stalls, corrals buried in white. Fence posts of red cedar 8 feet apart, chosen because they resisted rot. Jim had built every inch of it himself back when building things felt like enough. He pulled the wagon to the porch and carried her bag inside. One bag. Everything she owned in the world fit in a canvas sack small enough for a child to carry. The house smelled of old wood smoke and coffee grounds, of emptiness and the particular silence that comes from too many rooms with too few people. Jim lit the stove, hung his coat on the peg his wife had installed in 1871, the same year someone had carved initials into a brass compass. He heated yesterday's stew, sliced bread with a knife that needed sharpening. Emma ate slowly, methodically, never once setting down that compass. She held it in her left hand while she ate with her right, as if letting go meant losing the last connection to everything she had been. When she finished, Jim showed her upstairs. 3 bedrooms, his at the end of the hall, plain and spare. The empty middle room, clean sheets, and a quilt his wife had sewn in a log cabin pattern, blue and white fabric cut and stitched with a precision that still hurt to see. "This one is yours," he said, opening the middle door. "Wash basin downstairs, privy out back. I will show you in the morning." Her eyes drifted to the locked door at the end of the hall. "Whose room is that?" The words came hard, pushing past scar tissue that had never properly healed. "My daughter's, Sarah. She died 7 years ago. Scarlet fever. She was 6. Mama looked at the floor. "I am sorry." "So am I." There were rooms in a man's heart he never opened again. Not because he wanted to forget, but because remembering hurt too much to survive intact. Footsteps on the porch interrupted the moment. Someone knocking. Jim descended, grateful for the intrusion, and opened the door. Ruth Brennan stood there with a covered pot, snow caught in her gray hair like premature frost. 58 years old, the midwife who had delivered half the county, including the girl now standing silent at the top of the stairs. "Heard you brought the Sullivan girl home," Ruth said, stepping inside without invitation. She set the pot on the table. Beef stew, still hot. "Figured you would need more than yesterday's leavings." "Appreciate it." Ruth lowered her voice, though Emma would hear anyway. The house was not large enough for secrets. "You know what you are doing, Jim? Giving a child a home. You are giving a child with property a home. There is a difference." Ruth's eyes, sharp as tack points, found his. "Marcus Sullivan has been asking folks about the Sullivan land. 640 acres with railroad access. He is blood kin. He has legal standing. She is a child who needed a home. She is a child who owns land." Ruth's fingers drummed on the table, a nervous habit from decades of waiting through difficult births. "When do those 90 days run out?" Jim felt cold settle into his bones that had nothing to do with January. "What 90 days?" "Robert Sullivan's homestead deed was never claimed. Law says she has 90 days from her parents' death to register it, or it reverts to the county." Ruth's pause felt deliberate, weighted. Marcus is the county land assessor. When on March 1st, 6 weeks. Footsteps on the stairs. Emma descended slowly, the compass still in her hand. She walked to the table and unfolded a piece of paper that looked like it had been folded and unfolded 1,000 times. Hand-drawn careful lines, 7 markers labeled in a child's script. A boundary map. Jim stared. Who taught you to draw survey maps? Papa. Her finger traced the lines with the confidence of someone who had memorized more than ink and paper. Every spring, we walked the boundary. He made me memorize the landmarks. Lightning-struck pine, three-stone cairn, Wolf Den Ridge, Split Boulder, Eagle's Nest Cottonwood, Spring Seep, Old Fort at the creek. She looked up, and in her eyes Jim saw something ancient and unbreakable. Papa said the land has secrets only family knows. He said never trust paper more than what the earth remembers. Outside, the wind scraped ice against the windows. Somewhere in the dark, a wolf howled. And Jim Thornton, 45 years old and still haunted by the daughter he could not save, felt the first stirrings of something he had not felt in 7 years. Purpose. Marcus arrived 4 days later, mid-morning, horse-tied at the post-leather satchel under his arm that spoke of official business and legal consequence. Jim was splitting wood when he saw him coming up the path, each step measured and confident. Morning, Jim. Marcus's smile showed too many teeth. Heard you took in my niece. Appreciate that. She needed a home. She needs family. Marcus patted the satchel, which is why I am here. Got some paperwork to settle. Inside, Emma was upstairs. Jim heard the floorboards creak. She would be listening at the top of the stairs, pressed against the wall, holding her breath. Jim poured coffee without asking if Marcus wanted any. The ritual of hospitality performed without warmth obligation, met but not exceeded. Marcus spread papers across the table. The smell of ink filled the small room, sharp and chemical. See, Robert and Margaret, God rest them, they borrowed money from me. $800 for medicine during the typhoid outbreak. He tapped a document. The paper was too white, Jim noticed. Too clean for something supposedly 4 months old. The signature looked wrong, too. Too smooth, lacking the hesitation marks that real signatures carried. I got the promissory note right here, notarized and filed. Now they are gone. The debt falls to their estate. That would be the 640 acres. Jim looked at the paper without touching it. 800 is a considerable sum. More than the land is worth, truth be told. But I am family, so I am willing to call it square. Emma signs the deed over to me. Debt forgiven. Clean and simple. She is 9 years old, which is why she needs a guardian to help her make smart choices. Marcus pulled out another document, this one bearing an official seal. I have legal guardianship papers here. Blood kin. County already approved it. Just needs the judge's signature when he comes through in May. She is staying here. Marcus's smile thinned like ice over deep water. You are a good man, Jim, but you have no legal standing. I am her uncle, her only living relative. Sheriff will side with blood and law, not charity. The floorboards creaked louder. Emma's footsteps descending. You cannot make her sign nothing, Jim said. Will not have to make her. She is a smart girl. She will see it is the right thing. Marcus gathered his papers with hands that looked soft, uncalloused. Hands that had never split wood or birthed calves or held a dying child through fever dreams. I will give you folks a few days to think it over. But come March 1st, that land reverts to county administration anyway. Better she signs it to family than loses it to strangers. He tipped his hat and left. His horse kicked up frozen mud riding out. Emma stood at the bottom of the stairs, face pale as fresh snow. Papa never borrowed no money from Uncle Marcus. Papa did not trust him. Said he had snake eyes. I believe you. What happens if I do not sign? We will figure something. But 2 days later, the sheriff came. Sheriff Hayes was a decent man wearing the law like a collar 2 sizes too small. He stood on the porch with a paper in his hand, breath steaming in the morning air. His badge caught the winter-like cold brass, freshly polished. Got a court summons for you, Jim. He handed it over. You need to show legal guardianship by March 1st, or the girl goes to her uncle. Judge's orders. Marcus stepped out from behind the sheriff's horse, that same thin smile. Nothing personal, Sheriff. Just want what is best for Emma. Ruth Brennan was coming up the road with a basket of eggs. She stopped when she saw Marcus stopped so suddenly the eggs rattled. "You paid them, did you not?" Marcus turned. "I am sorry, the three families at the auction, the ones who walked away." Ruth set the basket down hard enough that Jim heard shells crack. "You paid them to reject her so nobody else would bid so you could take her yourself." Marcus shrugged with the ease of someone who knew the accusations could not stick. "Town knows she is trouble. Typhoid orphan. I am doing everyone a favor taking responsibility." "You are doing yourself a favor." Ruth's voice cut like a freshly stropped razor. "That land touches the railroad route. You have been measuring boundary posts after dark with railroad men. I have seen you." "Careful, Mrs. Brennan. Slander is a serious accusation." The sheriff shifted his weight. Spurs jingled. "Marcus, is that true?" "I am the county land assessor. Measuring land is my job." Marcus mounted his horse, leather creaking. "Jim has till March 1st. After that, Emma comes with me. That is the law." He rode off. The sheriff followed slower, glancing back like he wanted to say something, but could not find the words or the courage. Emma came out onto the porch. She had been listening again. She walked past Jim and Ruth down the steps and pulled her hand-drawn map from her coat pocket, unfolded it on the chopping block, weighing down the corners with rocks still wet from melted snow. "Papa walked this with me every spring since I was 6, she said. Her finger traced the boundary line. 7 markers. He would quiz me. Where is the split boulder chima? How many stones in the cairn? Which direction does the lightning pine lean? He made me close my eyes and point north using the land, not the compass." She looked up at Jim. "Uncle Marcus does not know none of that. He has only seen maps in the county office. But those maps are wrong." "Wrong how?" "The creek moved in the 1880 flood. Papa showed me the old banks 30 yards west of where it runs now. The county map shows the new course, but the boundary markers follow the old one." She tapped the compass. "Papa said maps lie. Land does not." Jim stared at the drawing. 7 landmarks in a child's careful hand. Marcus did not just want the land. He needed Emma gone so nobody would know the truth. That night Ruth came back. She carried a leather-bound book under her coat, her midwife's ledger. 20 years of births and deaths recorded in careful script. "I was there when Robert and Margaret died," she said, setting the book on the table. The smell of old paper and dried herbs drifted up when she opened it. "February of 82. Typhoid took them within 3 days of each other. Before Robert Sullivan passed, he grabbed my hand, made me write down his words exact." She turned to a page marked with a ribbon. The handwriting was shaky but clear, dated and witnessed. "Keep Emma safe, keep the land. Railroad wants it. Do not let Marcus have it." Jim leaned closer. The ink had faded, but the message remained testimony from beyond the grave. "Robert knew his brother," Ruth continued. "Knew Marcus would come sniffing around the property soon as the ground thawed enough to survey." She lowered her voice, though Emma was upstairs, supposedly asleep. "I have seen Marcus out there at night, week ago near midnight. Him and 2 men in railroad coats measuring boundary posts with lanterns. They did not see me. I was delivering the chin baby up on the ridge. But I saw them." Emma appeared at the table, moving silent as smoke. She traced her mother's name in the ledger with one finger. Sarah Sullivan. The ink had faded, but the loops were still there, careful and proud. "That land touches Frozen Creek," Ruth said. "Creek is the treaty boundary with the Lakota has been since 68. If Marcus claims Emma's land, he is claiming right up to treaty land. Maybe over it, depending on where he draws the line." She closed the book. "That will not sit quiet with the tribes." "Cannot fight the law with maybe," Jim said. "No, but you can fight it with older law." Ruth stood. "There is a horse trader named Daniel Whitefeather, Lakota, deals with the ranches up north. He knows treaty law better than any white lawyer in the territory. I will send word." She left the ledger. Emma ran her fingers over her mother's signature until Jim told her it was time for sleep. 3 days later, Daniel came. Daniel Whitefeather rode a paint horse with winter thick coat steam rising off its flanks. 43 years old, braids going, gray eyes that missed nothing. He dismounted slow, studying the ranch like he was reading a map written in fence posts and shadows. "Ruth Brennan says you got trouble." No greeting, no small talk. Jim offered coffee. Daniel accepted. They sat at the table while Emma watched from the stairs, half hidden in the dimness. The Sullivan homestead. Daniel unrolled a doeskin map, old and creased. Symbols marked in faded ink. Lakota markings, not English. This is the 68 treaty map, Fort Laramie. Frozen Creek boundary runs here. His finger traced a line. Your girl's land touches, it maybe crosses it, depending whose survey you trust. Marcus is trying to take it from her. Marcus Sullivan, county assessor. Daniel's mouth tightened. Man has been filing claims near treaty land for 2 years. Always just inside the line. Always just legal enough. He looked up. Disputes on treaty boundaries do not go to territorial court. They go to tribal council. Old law, older than Montana, older than the county. Jim felt something shift in his chest like ice breaking on a frozen river. I'm saying if your girl's boundary falls under treaty jurisdiction, Marcus has no authority, blood kin or not. Daniel rolled the map. But you would need proof, and you would need the elders to agree to hear it. I got proof, Emma's voice from the stairs. She came down slow, holding her hand-drawn map and the compass. She set them both on the table next to Daniel's treaty map. Papa taught me every boundary marker. Creek is the western edge. Treaty markers are still there. 3-stone cairn with the year carved in the bottom stone. Papa showed me. 1868. Daniel studied her map. Then he looked at the girl. Really looked the way you would look at a horse to see if it had good bones. You walk that boundary. Every spring since I was 6, Papa quizzed me till I could name every landmark blind. How old are you now? 9. So you walked it 3 times before your papa died. 4. We walked it the week before he got sick. Daniel refolded his map. Outside, the wind had shifted, coming from the south now, carrying the smell of wet earth instead of ice. The first hint of thaw. I will talk to the elders, see if they will hear the case. He stood, then paused at the door. There is a traveling judge, Artemis Cole, delayed in Helena, will not arrive till May, but his clerks sent word. Temporary guardianship approved for you, Jim, till the judge gets here to make it permanent. Jim exhaled. 6 weeks. We have 6 weeks. Daniel mounted his horse. Marcus will not like this. Man has got plans. Men with plans get dangerous when you block them. He rode off toward the northern ridge. Emma watched him go, then looked at Jim. Is he going to help us? He is going to try to. But on the ridge above the ranch, half hidden in the pines, Marcus Sullivan sat on his horse with a spyglass watching. When Daniel disappeared over the hill, Marcus turned and rode hard toward town. Marcus called a town meeting. Sunday after church, everyone packed into the fellowship hall. 40, maybe 50 people. The room smelled of damp wool and old hymn books. Coal stove in the corner, struggling against the cold that seeped through walls older than most of the congregation. Marcus stood at the front. Documents spread on the table like a preacher's Bible. Appreciate you all coming. Need to discuss a matter affecting the whole town. Jim sat in the back with Emma. Ruth Brennan was 3 rows up. Daniel Whitefeather stood by the door. He had come down from the ridge when he heard. You all know my niece Emma. Marcus gestured toward her. Lost her parents to typhoid. Tragic. I offered to take her in. Family taking care of family. But Mr. Thornton here decided he knew better. He shuffled papers. Now I got nothing against Jim. Good man. But he has got no legal standing. I am blood kin. The law is clear. A few heads nodded. Marcus's voice got softer, more reasonable. Here is what folks might not know. That Sullivan homestead, 640 acres, it has got railroad access. The Northern Pacific has been surveying a depot site. They approached me last fall, offered $2,000 for the land rights. He paused. At the 2,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. More money than most families saw in 5 years. I accepted on behalf of Emma's estate, signed the contract, took the money. The room went silent. That money went to improve the county road. New bridge over Blacktail Creek. Grading work on the Helena Road. Things that benefit everyone here. But now, he spread his hands. If I cannot deliver that land, the railroad pulls out. No depot, no jobs, no road improvements. And I have got to pay back $2,000 I do not have. A businessman in the front row, Denton, stood up. You are saying if this girl does not sign over her land, the whole town loses. I am saying we all have got a stake in this. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jim felt them turning, felt the weight of practical people doing practical math. One orphan girl's inheritance versus 50 jobs in a railroad depot. Emma gripped his arm. Her fingers were cold. Now Jim has got temporary guardianship, Marcus said. Judge's clerk approved it. But come May, when Judge Cole arrives, that will be reviewed, and the judge will ask what is best for the child. Living with a stranger or living with blood family who can provide for her future. Provide by stealing her land, Ruth called out. Heads turned. You never borrowed Robert Sullivan $800. That is a lie. I was there when he died. He told me you would try this. Marcus's smile did not change. Mrs. Brennan grief makes us remember things different sometimes. I have got the promissory note, notarized and filed. Filed where county office, where you are the assessor. Ruth stood. Convenient. Are you accusing me of forgery? I am saying Robert Sullivan did not trust you far as he could spit. The crowd shifted, some nodding at Ruth, others looking uncomfortable. Marcus had lived here 12 years, held a county position. Ruth was a midwife, respected, but still a woman speaking against a man's business. Daniel Whitefeather spoke from the doorway. The Sullivan land touches Frozen Creek. Treaty boundary, 68. Any dispute goes to tribal council, not territorial court. Marcus turned. The treaty line has been surveyed. Sullivan Homestead is on the white side, barely, but legal. Barely is doing a lot of work in that sentence, Daniel said. The businessman Denton stood again. Look, I respect tribal law, but we have got 50 families here depending on that depot. We cannot lose it over one girl's claim. Maybe she does not understand what she is giving up. Maybe someone needs to explain it to her, simple. 3 families in the middle rows stood and walked out. Witnesses who had promised to testify for Emma gone like morning frost under sun. Marcus watched them go, satisfaction flickering across his face. I am not the enemy here, folks. I am trying to do right by my niece in this community. Sometimes doing right means making hard choices. The meeting broke up. People filed out, not meeting Jim's eyes. The count was clear. Maybe 40% believed Marcus's story, enough to poison any legal case. Outside, Emma was shaking, not from cold. They think I am being selfish, she whispered. They think Marcus has got the law on his side, Jim said. Different thing. But that night the law burned. Midnight, the courthouse bell started clanging. Not the hour, fire bell. Jim was up instantly, pulling on boots. Through the window he saw orange light over the town 3 miles south. He rode hard. Emma wanted to come, but he told her, stay with the rifle by the door. Ruth would be there in 10 minutes. The courthouse was fully engulfed when he arrived. Flames punching through the roof. Windows exploding from the heat. The volunteer brigade had 2 pump wagons going, but it was not enough. The building was 80 years old, dry timber and old paint burning like it had waited decades for this moment. Sheriff Hayes stood watching, face lit orange. Started in the records room, spread fast, anyone inside. Building was locked. The sheriff pointed, but Hoskins was seen riding out about an hour ago. Marcus's clerk. Horse was lathered like he had been riding hard. The roof collapsed with a roar. Sparks shot into the black sky. The smell of burning paper choked the air. Decades of land records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, death notices, all turning to ash. Jim's chest went tight. The land deeds. Gone. The sheriff wiped soot from his face. Every homestead patent, every claim, every survey. If folks do not have private copies, they have got nothing. The Sullivans did not keep copies. Robert had trusted the county registry. A horse approached. Marcus Sullivan riding in slow. He dismounted, stood next to Jim, watching the flames. Terrible thing, Marcus said. All that history. Your clerk was seen leaving. Hoskins does not work nights. Must have been someone else. Marcus's voice was calm. Too calm. Though I suppose with all those records, a lot of claims will be hard to prove. Good thing I got Robert and Margaret's promissory note filed at the bank. Safe and sound. He smiled in the firelight. The courthouse bell tower collapsed, sending up a column of sparks. The whole building was going. 3 hours later, it was just smoking timbers and ash. The safe survived. They pulled out $3,000 in cash, but every document inside had been incinerated. Emma's proof was gone. All of it. Jim rode back at dawn. Emma was on the porch waiting. She saw his face and knew. The deeds burned. Everything burned. She sat down hard on the steps, the brass compass within her hand like always. She turned it over and over, the metal catching the weak morning light. "Papa's map is in my head," she said quietly. "He made me walk it till I could draw it blind. I can still do it." She looked up. "But will anyone believe me?" Marcus arrived that afternoon. He did not even dismount. "Terrible about the fire," he called down. "But I suppose it settles things. Cannot prove ownership without deeds. Come, may the land reverts to county administration. Unless," he smiled, "unless Emma signs it over to family now. Save everyone the trouble." He turned his horse and rode off. The mud came 3 days later. Temperature climbed above freezing for the first time since January. Snow turned to slush. The road became a brown river. Spring was not here yet, but winter was losing its grip. Jim and Emma sat on the porch in the gathering dusk. The smell of wet earth surrounded them. Somewhere up the creek, ice groaned as it broke. "I cannot let him win," Emma said. "We will not." But Jim did not know how. Did not know how to fight a man who controlled the records, who had the law on his side, who was willing to burn down a courthouse to get what he wanted. Above them, stars began to emerge, cold and distant and indifferent to the struggles of men and girls and land that remembered more than paper could record. In 20 years sitting on this same porch with gray in his hair and his granddaughter learning to read a compass at his feet, Jim would remember this moment, would remember the weight of not knowing, of standing at the edge of an abyss with only a child's memory as a bridge. That was the night I realized he would tell them, voice rough with age and remembering, that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing are not the same, and a man has to choose which one he is willing to fight for. But that night, 45 years old and 7 years past his last daughter's grave, Jim Thornton only knew that he had made a promise. $50 had bought him that much. The cost of keeping it, he was only beginning to understand. Spring arrived not as a single moment, but as a series of small surrenders. The mud came first 3 days after the courthouse burned. Temperature climbed above freezing and stayed there. Snow turned to slush that sucked at boot heels and wagon wheels with equal determination. The road became a river of brown water and broken ice. Frozen Creek roared with melt-swollen banks threatening to breach like they had in 1880. Jim found the branding iron in the barn corner buried under old tack and the accumulated debris of years trying to forget. Rusted but still readable. SR for Sullivan Ranch, Robert Sullivan's mark. He cleaned it with sand and oil until the letters showed clear metal bright beneath the oxidation. Emma was feeding the chickens when he called her over. The birds scattered, clucking their displeasure at the interruption. 3 calves had been born on the disputed land back in January during the worst of the cold. Technically Emma's if the claim held. They were pens separate now waiting. "Your papa teach you about branding?" Emma nodded, scattering the last of the grain. "Watched him do it twice. He said every rancher has got a mark. It is how you prove what is yours when paper fails. Time you learn to do it yourself." He built up the fire in the yard oak split and stacked until flames rose steady and hot. Set the iron in the coals. The smell of hot metal and burning oak filled the morning air, familiar as prayer. "Going to take 10 minutes to heat proper. Meanwhile, you hold the calf steady. I will show you how." The first calf was a bull, reddish-brown, maybe 80 pounds of muscle and stubbornness. Jim held it down while Emma watched him position the iron. His hands remembered this even if his heart had tried to forget. 7 years since he had branded anything. 7 years since Sarah died and he stopped caring about the future enough to mark it as his own. Firm pressure. 3 seconds. No longer, or you cook the hide too deep. The brand sizzled against flesh. The calf bawled. Smoke rose, smelling of burnt hair and spring mud and something like commitment. "Your turn." Emma hesitated. The iron glowed orange in the coals heat, shimmering the air above it like a living thing. "I might hurt it. You will hurt it. But you will also mark it as yours. Pain is temporary. Proof lasts." She pulled on the leather gloves. They swallowed, her hands made for a man's grip. She lifted the iron wobbly at first, then steadier as she adjusted to the weight. Jim held the second calf. Small hands, but they did not shake. Press. Too light. The brand barely kissed the hide. Harder. Make it count. She pressed again. The hide sizzled. The SR mark sank in clean smoke curling. She stepped back, and the calf scrambled up, shaking itself like waking from a bad dream. That is good work. Ruth Brennan had arrived during the second branding. She stood by the fence with her ledger open, writing in that careful script that had recorded births and deaths for 20 years. When Emma finished the third calf, arms trembling from the effort, Ruth read aloud. March 15th, 1883. Emma Grace Sullivan demonstrates competence in cattle management and land stewardship. Brands 3 head of cattle using her father's registered mark. Shows age-appropriate understanding of ranching operations. She looked at Emma. Judge will want to know if you are capable. Now we got it written, witnessed, and dated. From the tree line 100 yards out, Marcus's hired man Cobb watched through a spyglass. When the branding was done, he turned his horse and rode fast toward town, carrying news that would not sit well with his employer. That evening, Daniel Whitefeather returned. He brought news that changed everything. Tribal elders agreed to hear the case, he said. They sat at the kitchen table. Jim, Emma, Ruth, and Daniel. Rain drummed on the tin roof, steady and cold spring rain that still held memory of winter. April 20th, Frozen Creek boundary. They will arbitrate under the 68 treaty. That is 5 weeks, Jim said. Judge Cole will not arrive till mid-May. This happens first. Daniel unrolled the treaty map. But here is the problem. Your proof burned. All you got now is Emma's memory against Marcus's filed deed. Elders will listen to a child. They respect truth more than age. But she has got to be perfect. One mistake, one landmark she cannot name, and Marcus's deed stands. Emma pulled her hand-drawn map from her pocket. It was worn now, edges soft from being folded and unfolded 100 times. I can name them all. Naming is not enough. You got to walk it with witnesses. Show them exactly where each marker sits. Daniel tapped the treaty map. 7 landmarks: Lightning Struck Pine, 3 Stone Cairn, Wolf Den Ridge, Split Boulder, Eagle's Nest Cottonwood, Spring Seep, Old Ford. I know where they are. Knowing and proving are different. Daniel looked at Jim. We got 5 weeks to prepare her testimony. She has got to walk that boundary till she can do it in her sleep. Rain, mud, dark does not matter. She has got to be certain. Marcus will not sit quiet for 5 weeks, Ruth said. No, he will try to stop this. Daniel stood, which is why we need witnesses, White and Lakota both. People who will testify they saw Emma walk that line, name those markers without help. Rain picked up. Water streamed off the eaves in sheets. The sound filled the house, filled the silence that followed Daniel's words. We start tomorrow, Jim said. Emma and me. We walk that boundary, map every landmark. Then we do it again with witnesses. Emma pulled out her compass. The brass was dull now, fire smoke stained from the night of the courthouse burning. She opened it. The needle stuck halfway. She tapped it 3 times the way her father had taught her when it jammed. The needle release swung north, settled. Papa showed me a trick, she said quietly. County maps show the creek where it runs now. But the creek moved in the 80 flood. I was 6. Papa took me to the old banks. They are still there 30 yards west, covered in grass now. But you can see where the water used to run. She traced the line on her map. The boundary markers follow the old course, not the new one. Daniel leaned forward. Marcus's deed uses the new course. I seen it when Ruth brought the copy from the land office. Emma's finger stopped at a symbol on her map. Right here, Papa put a 3 Stone Cairn on the old bank. Bottom stone has got 1868 carved in it. Treaty marker. If Marcus's deed uses the new creek, it is wrong. Off by 30 yards. That puts part of his claim on the Lakota side. The room went silent, except for the rain. If we can prove the creek moved, Daniel said slowly, and Marcus's deed uses the wrong course, then his deed is not just wrong, it is forgery. Not just mistaken, Ruth finished, a deliberate lie. Daniel rolled up the treaty map. 5 weeks, we find that cairn, we walk that old creek bed. We prove Marcus's deed contradicts the land itself. He looked at Emma. You sure you can do this? She closed the compass. Papa always said maps lie. Land does not. Outside the rain turned to sleet. Through the window distant on the ridge, a single rider watched the ranch. Then he turned and disappeared into the storm. The rumor started at the general store. Jim heard it 3 days later from the blacksmith, a man named Hodges, who had shoed horses for 30 years and heard everything worth knowing and plenty that was not. There is talk going around town. Hodges hammered, a shoe sparks flying. The forge smelled of hot iron and coal smoke. About you and the Sullivan girl. Some folks saying it ain't right. A grown man raising a girl alone. Saying maybe you got plans for when she is older. Jim's blood went cold. Not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like ice in his veins. Who is saying that? Hodges kept hammering. Do not know who started it, but it is spreading. Denton mentioned it at the saloon last night. Said someone has got to think about what is proper. It was a frontier tactic, oldest poison in the book. Destroy a man's reputation, destroy his guardianship claim, make people look sideways at every kind gesture, every protective act. Turn love into something twisted and wrong. Jim found Emma at the general store an hour later. She was standing by the fabric bolts, frozen. Two women were whispering behind the counter, loud enough for her to hear, voices pitched to carry like they wanted an audience. Raising her like that alone in that house might seem innocent now, but in a few years, Emma's face had gone white. When she saw Jim, she ran past him out the door down the muddy street. He followed, found her behind the livery stable sitting in the wet straw crying. They think you are bad, she choked out. I know what they think. But if everyone believes it, then everyone is wrong. He knelt in the mud beside her. Emma, look at me. She did, eyes red, face streaked with tears and dirt. Marcus started this. It is a trap. He wants me to do something stupid. Get angry. Prove I am unfit. But I will not give him that. That night he rode to the saloon anyway. Denton was there drinking with 3 other men. The room smelled of whiskey and tobacco smoke. Piano music stopped when Jim walked in. The silence spread like ripples on still water. Heard you got something to say about me, Jim said. Denton turned, just concerned for the girl's welfare. A man your age raising a child alone. Jim hit him. One punch. Denton went down, hard, chair clattering. Blood from his split lips splattered the sawdust floor. The room erupted. 2 men pulled Jim back, hands on his arms like iron bands. Sheriff Hayes appeared from the corner where he had been sitting watching. Waiting for exactly this. That is enough. The sheriff's voice cut through like a blade. Jim, outside now. Lost on the boardwalk, the sheriff pushed Jim against the wall. His badge reflected lamplight from inside. Cold brass. Official. You just did exactly what Marcus wanted. The sheriff's voice was quiet, furious. Gave him proof you are violent, unstable, unfit to raise a child. He is spreading lies. And you just made them believable. The sheriff stepped back. One more outburst. One. And I arrest you for assault. Then Marcus gets Emma automatic. That what you want? He walked away. Jim stood in the rain, fists shaking, tasting failure like copper in his mouth. When he got back to the ranch, Ruth was waiting. She had brought Emma inside, wrapped her in a quilt. The girl was asleep on the sofa, face still tear-stained. Ruth pulled Jim into the kitchen. Marcus is playing chess. You are playing checkers. We need his weakness. He is county assessor. He has got the law. No, Ruth sat. He has got papers. And papers can be wrong. The next morning, she rode to the county land office. The clerk, a young man named Williams who owed Ruth for delivering his son through a breech birth that should have killed them both, let her see the filed deeds. All the surveyor's copies required by law stored in fireproof cabinets separate from the courthouse. Marcus's deed for the Sullivan property was there, filed 6 weeks before the courthouse fire. Convenient. Ruth brought it back in a leather tube, unrolled it on Jim's table, while Daniel Whitefeather studied it against the treaty map. Here is your creek, Daniel said, tracing the blue line on Marcus's deed. Frozen Creek boundary runs right here. That is where the creek runs now, Emma said. She had been quiet all morning, but now she leaned over the maps. But it did not used to. Daniel looked at her. Explain. Spring of '80, I was 6. We had 3 weeks of rain. Creek flooded. Papa took me up on the ridge to watch. Water cut a new channel 30 yards east of the old one. took out a beaver dam and 2 cottonwoods. When it settled, the creek ran in a new bed. She pulled out her hand-drawn map. Papa showed me the old banks after. Said surveyors would get confused now. Said anyone using new maps would have the boundary wrong. Daniel compared the maps. Marcus's deed showed the current creek course. The treaty map from 1868 showed something different. The treaty map shows the creek running west of where Marcus has got it, Daniel said, 30 yards west. The old course, Emma confirmed. If Marcus's deed uses the new creek course, then part of his claim is off by 30 yards. Ruth leaned closer. Daniel's finger traced the error, which means his boundary crosses onto treaty land. Even if it is just a strip, it is still Lakota territory. His deed is not just wrong, it is invalid. The room went quiet. Rain pattered on the roof. Outside, the mud was ankle deep and the creek roared with snowmelt. "Can you prove the creek moved?" Daniel asked Emma. "Yes, sir. Old banks are still there. Grass covered now, but you can see where the water cut, and the cairn is still standing. I seen it last spring before Papa died." "But if we walk that old creek bed," Ruth said slowly, "and find that cairn with the treaty marker, we prove Marcus's deed is forged." Daniel rolled up the treaty map. Not just mistaken, deliberately false. He used the new creek to grab extra land. Jim looked at Emma. "You sure you can find that cairn?" She touched her compass. "Papa made me find it with my eyes closed. Made me count steps from the split boulder turn at the Eagle's Nest, Cottonwood Walk straight to the old bank. I'd done it 5 times. I can do it again." Thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was moving closer. "We got 4 weeks till the hearing," Daniel said. "We need to walk that boundary, find every marker, map the old creek bed, get witnesses." He paused. "But Marcus knows we are on to something now. He will be watching, and men with secrets get desperate." That night, Emma could not sleep. She came downstairs where Jim was cleaning his rifle, the Winchester, from above the fireplace. Oil and lamplight in the smell of gunmetal. She sat across from him, the compass in her hands. "What if I am wrong?" she whispered. "What if I remember it different? What if the cairn is not where I think? You walked it 4 times with your papa." "But I was little. Maybe I got confused." "Emma," he set down the rifle. "Your papa taught you because he knew this day might come. He knew Marcus, knew what kind of man he was. He taught you so you would have proof even when the paper burned." He nodded at the compass. "That compass in your memory, that is all we got. But it is enough." She opened the compass. The needle swung, stuck, released. She did not tap it this time. Just watched it settle north. Papa used to say, "Trust the land. Land does not forget, does not change its story. People lie, paper burns, but a 3-stone cairn sits where it was put. The earth remembers." Outside, lightning flashed. In the brief light, they saw a rider on the ridge watching the house. When darkness returned, the rider was gone. A man in his mid-60s, sitting on a porch in 1903, with his coffee going cold, would remember that moment. Would remember the weight of a child's faith pressing against the hollowness of his doubt. Would tell his granddaughter that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. But that night, Jim Thornton only knew that tomorrow they would start walking a boundary that existed now only in a 9-year-old girl's memory, and that everything, absolutely everything, depended on her being right. They came at night. 3 riders' torches lit, driving Jim's cattle toward the canyon edge like pushing souls toward damnation. The gunshots woke him. Sharp cracks echoing off the ridge, multiplying in the darkness until it sounded like a war. He was out the door with his rifle before he was fully awake, boots unlaced, shirt hanging open. 50 heads scattered across the south pasture, running blind with terror. 2 steers went over the drop. He heard them hit the rocks below, the sound, wet and final. The riders circled back, whooping like demons, driving more cattle toward the edge. Their torches threw wild shadows across the mud, made everything chaos and confusion. Jim fired once over their heads. They scattered into the dark, laughing, the sound of it worse than the gunshots. By dawn, he had counted the damage. 12 head lost in the canyon. 6 more injured, broke legs, gashed flanks, eyes wild with pain and fear. He had to shoot 3 of them himself. The sound of those gunshots would stay with him, wake him from sleep years later, when everything else had faded to comfortable distance. $600 gone, half a year's income, and spring calving still 2 months away. He sat on the porch at sunrise, rifle across his knees. The air smelled of wet earth and blood. Crows circled over the canyon, black against the pale sky, patient as death itself. Marcus's hired men, Cobb and Reed and one other. Everyone knew, but nobody could prove it. That was Marcus's way. Hire the violence. Keep his hands clean. Let other men do the devil's work while he sat in town with his official papers and his official position. Jim's hands tightened on the rifle. Marcus's office was 3 miles south. Easy ride. One bullet. Problem solved. Are you going to give up on me? He turned. Emma stood in the doorway in her nightgown, barefoot. Her face was pale in the gray light. Go back to bed. Are you? She walked onto the porch. That is what Uncle Marcus wants. He wants you to quit or do something stupid so the sheriff arrests you. Then I lose. Uncle Marcus wins, and Papa's land goes to the railroad. The crows called in the distance. The smell of death drifted up from the canyon. He killed half my herd. I know. She sat beside him. But if you ride to town with that rifle, I lose everything, and he knows that. He is counting on it. Jim stared at the horizon. The sun was rising red, painting the clouds the color of the blood drying on the rocks below. I lost my Sarah to scarlet fever 7 years ago, he said quietly. Could not afford the doctor from Helena. $75 for a house call. I did not have it. She died 3 days later, burning up with fever, and I could not do nothing but watch. His voice cracked. Knew I am losing everything again trying to save you. The cattle, the money, my reputation. And for what? So you can keep land Marcus is going to take anyway. Emma did not answer right away. She pulled the compass from her pocket, opened it. The needle stuck. She tapped it 3 times. It released. Papa said land remembers even when people forget. Said truth is like water. It finds its way through eventually. You just got to be patient. She looked at him. I ain't asking you to lose everything. I am asking you to help me prove what is true, that is all. 3 days passed. Jim mended what he could, buried the dead cattle, counted losses that went beyond money, watched Marcus's hired men ride the ridge at night, torches visible like devil's eyes in the darkness. On the 3rd morning, hoofbeats. Daniel Whitefeather riding hard, his paint horse lathered with sweat despite the cold. He dismounted fast, breath steaming. Elders changed the date. Jim stood from the porch where he had been oiling his rifle. What? The hearing cannot wait till April 20th. Not after this. Daniel gestured at the canyon where crows still circled. Marcus is escalating. Cattle stampede, the rumors about you and Emma. Word reached the reservation. Elders say violence is coming. They want this settled now before someone dies. When 4 days, maybe 3, if we can gather witnesses faster. Ruth arrived on her bay, had heard the commotion. I can spread word, get people ready. Daniel nodded. We need to walk that boundary tomorrow. Final practice, with witnesses. Then the hearing the day after. Jim felt time compressing like a fist around his chest. 5 weeks had become days. Emma ready? She has got to be. Marcus knows we found the creek discrepancy. He knows about the treaty stone. He is out of options except violence or running. And Marcus Sullivan does not run. That night they gathered supplies, extra ammunition, dried meat, blankets in case they had to camp on the trail. Ruth brought her testimony ledger wrapped in oilcloth to protect from rain. Daniel arranged for the Lakota witnesses to meet them at Split Boulder at dawn. Emma could not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with her map tracing the boundary by lamplight. 7 landmarks. Her lips moved, naming them silently. Lightning Struck Pine, 3 Stone Cairn, Wolf Den Ridge, Split Boulder, Eagle's Nest Cottonwood, Spring Seep, Old Ford. What if I forget? She whispered when Jim came downstairs. You will not. But what if? He sat across from her. The lamplight made shadows dance on the walls. Outside, an owl called, hunting. Your papa taught you because he knew. Knew Marcus would try this, knew the paper might burn, knew everything could be taken except what you carried in your head. He tapped the map. This is not just lines and markers. This is your papa's voice, his hands guiding yours, his love protecting you even after he is gone. Emilia closed her eyes. I can hear him sometimes. When I walk the boundary, his voice telling me to count steps, look for the lightning scar, find the old creek bed. Then listen to that voice tomorrow. Trust it. The next morning, they walked the boundary one final time. Emma needed fabric for a new dress. The old one, soaked in creek water during the practice run, had torn beyond repair. Ruth offered to take her to town while Jim mended fence on the north pasture. They were coming out of the general store when Marcus appeared. Not alone this time, Cobb with him, and Reed. The three men blocked the boardwalk. Emma, Marcus said, voice too sweet, we need to talk about what is best for you. Ruth stood up between them. She has got nothing to say to you. I am her blood uncle. I got a right. You got no rights. Judge made that clear. Marcus's smile died. He nodded to Cobb. The hired man moved fast, grabbed Emma's arm, started pulling her toward the alley. Emma screamed. Ruth swung her basket, caught at Cobb across the face. Eggs exploded. He stumbled. Hoofbeats. Jim came around the corner at full gallop, the fence mending forgotten, when Ruth's scream reached the north pasture. He was off his horse before it stopped, rifle in hand. Let her go. Cobb released Emma like she burned. Marcus raised his hands, that false smile returning. Just trying to talk to my niece, Jim. No need for firearms. Trying to take her. There is a difference. Jim kept the rifle steady. Sheriff Hayes emerged from the land office across the street. He had seen everything. Marcus knew it. So did Jim. Mr. Sullivan, the sheriff said quietly, I think you should leave, now. Marcus mounted his horse, but before he rode off, he looked at Emma one last time. Tomorrow's hearing will not change nothing. You will see. Then he was gone. Emma shook in Ruth's arms. Jim lowered the rifle hands, trembling with rage he could not release. That was stupid, Ruth said, doing that in broad daylight. That was desperate, Jim corrected, and desperate men do not stop. Hoofbeats on the road. Daniel Whitefeather riding hard, his paint horse lathered. He pulled up at the fence. Tribal elders set the hearing. He called. Tomorrow, dawn, Frozen Creek. Tomorrow, Jim stood. We are not ready. Marcus knows we found the deed discrepancy. He is hiring more guns. Elders want this settled before it turns bloody. Daniel dismounted. We got 1 day to prepare Emma's testimony. One walk of that boundary, that is it. By noon, they had gathered the witnesses. Daniel brought 5 neighbors, Brett family Hollis Chin, and 2 ranchers from the northern ridge. Ruth came with her testimony ledger. 6 Lakota riders arrived from the reservation, silent men who sat their horses like they were part of the animals themselves. 14 people total. They met at the split boulder, the eastern edge of Emma's land. The boulder was 10 feet tall, split down the middle by lightning years ago. Wildflowers grew in the crack, purple and white, early spring blooms pushing through mud and memory. Daniel built a small fire. The smell of sage smoke drifted across the meadow, cleansing and ancient. He spoke in Lakota first, then English. Before we walk sacred ground, we purify. The girl will testify tomorrow. We make her ready. He had brought a sweat lodge frame. Willow branches bent into a dome covered with hides and blankets. They heated stones in the fire till they glowed red, carried them into the lodge with antler tongs. Emma and Jim went inside. Ruth followed. The flap closed. Darkness, heat, the smell of sage and cedar. Daniel poured water on the stones. Steam hissed up, choking hot, filling lungs like drowning in heat. The land speaks to those who listen, Daniel said in the darkness. Tomorrow the elders will listen. You must speak with the land's voice. Not your own fear, not your anger. The land's truth. They sat in the heat until Jim's lungs burned, until Emma's breathing steadied and deepened, until the fear in Jim's chest loosened just enough to let something else in. Hope, maybe. Or just the stubborn refusal to surrender. When they emerged, the air felt cold and clean. The sun was past noon. Now we walk, Daniel said. Emma led with the compass. Jim followed. The witnesses came behind, 12 of them, white and Lakota mixed. She walked to the split boulder, first touched the crack where the flowers grew. First marker, she said. Her voice was steady. Lightning split it in 76. Papa said you could smell the burn for 3 days after. She turned west, counting steps under her breath. 50 paces to a ridge covered in old wolf dens, holes dug deep into the hillside long abandoned. She knelt by the largest. Second marker, Wolf Den Ridge. Papa said a white wolf raised pups here in '79. He's seen them himself. The witnesses wrote it down. Emma moved on. Eagle's Nest Cottonwood, massive and bare branched, where eagles still nested when spring turned to summer. Spring Seep, where water ran clear even in August. The old ford where the creek used to be, shallow enough to cross on foot. Every landmark exactly where she said. Then the creek. It roared with snow melt brown and fast swollen with runoff. Emma stood on the bank and pointed west 30 yards upstream. That is where it used to run. Before the '80 flood, old banks are over there. They walked upstream. The grass was thick where the old channel had been, but Jim could see it once Emma pointed it out. A depression in the land, the earth still shaped by water that no longer flowed there. Cairn is here, Emma said. She walked to a pile of stones overgrown with grass. 3 stones stacked carefully. The witnesses circled. Daniel knelt and lifted the bottom stone. Carved into the underside, deep and unmistakable, T1 1868. Treaty marker, 15 years old, sitting exactly where Emma said it would be, on the bank of a creek that had moved decades ago. This proves the old course, Daniel said quietly. Marcus's deed uses the new creek. He is off by 30 yards. His claim crosses treaty land. Emma pulled out her compass to shoot a bearing north. The needle stuck hard. She tapped it once, twice, 3 times. The needle release swung, settled north. Last marker is the lightning pine, she said. Half-mile that direction. They walked. The pine stood dead and gray, 40 feet tall, bark stripped by the strike that killed it, unmistakable against the blue sky. 7th marker, Emma said, got struck in '77. Papa was standing right here when it happened. Said the crack was loud enough to wake the dead. She had done it, named all 7 landmarks, found the treaty marker, proved the old creek course. The witnesses signed Ruth's ledger. Daniel rolled up the treaty map. The sun was dropping toward the western ridge. Then they heard horses. Marcus appeared on the hill above them, flanked by 5 men. Cobb and Reed and 3 others Jim did not recognize, all armed. They sat their horses calm, looking down at the group below, like wolves studying sheep. Hearing is tomorrow dawn, Marcus called. Long ride through dangerous country. Awful lot of things can happen in the dark. The hired guns spread out, not threatening yet, just present, a reminder of what could be. You make it to that hearing, Marcus continued, and you will still lose. Elders can rule however they want. Judge Cole is the one who makes it legal, and he will not arrive for another month. Lot can change in a month. Daniel stepped forward. You threatening federal treaty or your arbitration? Marcus smiled. I'm just saying accidents happen. Creek is high. Trails are muddy. People get lost. He turned his horse and rode off. The hired guns followed slow, making sure everyone watched them go, making sure everyone understood. Jim counted them. 5 guns against 14 witnesses. Bad odds, but not impossible if Marcus got desperate enough. We leave for the tribal grounds at 4 in the morning, Daniel said quietly. Stay together. Stay armed. If they come, we will be ready. They left at 4 in the morning, still dark air, cold enough to see breath. Jim saddled 2 horses, his roan and the gray mare for Emma. Ruth came on her bay. Daniel arrived with the 5 witnesses and 6 Lakota riders. 14 people total. The tribal grounds were 8 miles north, following Frozen Creek upstream into the foothills. The trail was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 horses side by side. Canyon walls rose on both sides once they entered Devil's Narrows. Emma rode beside Jim, the compass in her coat pocket. She had not slept. Neither had he. They were 2 miles in when the gunfire started. Not aimed shots, warning shots, echoing off the canyon walls, impossibly loud, multiplying until it sounded like an army. The horses spooked. Emma's mare reared. Jim grabbed the reins, steadied her heart hammering against ribs. 5 riders blocked the trail ahead. Marcus's hired guns, Cobb and front rifle across his saddle. Behind him, Reed and 3 others. Hard men with dead eyes and the kind of patience that came from being paid to wait. Trail is closed, Cobb called. Daniel moved his paint horse forward. We got legal business at the tribal grounds, treaty right of passage. Do not care about treaty rights. Boss says nobody passes till after sunup. You all can turn around, come back later. Or we can have a disagreement right here. Jim counted. 5 guns ahead, 14 in his group, but only half were armed. Bad odds if it came to shooting. And Emma was right in the middle, exposed and fragile as hope itself. The canyon walls pressed close. Nowhere to go but forward or back. Cobb knew it. He smiled. Then the Lakota riders appeared. They came from the canyon rim, 12 warriors on horseback, materializing from the rocks like they had been part of the landscape all along, like the earth itself had birthed them from stone and shadow. Silent, everyone armed, they lined the ridge above, looking down at Cobb's men. Daniel had called them last night. Extra insurance. Cobb's smile died. He looked up at the ridge, counted the rifles, did the math. 5 against 26. His horse shifted nervously, sensing the change. Boss ain't going to like this, Cobb said. Boss can file a complaint with the tribal council, Daniel replied, right after they hear Emma's testimony. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then Cobb pulled his horse sideways, clearing the trail. His men followed. They rode past close enough that Jim could smell the whiskey on them, close enough to see Cobb's eyes on Emma, cold and measuring. The group continued upstream. The canyon opened into a meadow as the sun broke the eastern ridge. Frozen Creek ran clear here, cutting through grass that was just starting to green. A massive cottonwood stood near the water branches, bare but buds showing. Underneath the tree, 7 elders, Lakota men in their 60s and 70s, dressed in traditional clothes. They sat in a semicircle on blankets waiting. 40, maybe 50 people had gathered, mixed crowd, tribal members and white ranchers both. Word had spread. This was not just about one girl's land anymore. It was about whether treaty law still meant anything, whether the old promises still held weight, whether truth could stand against corruption. Marcus was already there. He had ridden ahead, come in from the North Trail. His lawyer, a man named Buckley from Helena, stood beside him with a leather case full of documents. Marcus looked calm, confident, like a man who held all the cards and knew exactly how to play them. Jim dismounted, helped Emma down. Her legs were shaking. He wanted to go with her, but Daniel shook his head. This part she has got to do alone. The head elder stood. Rising Hawk, 80 years old, face carved deep with lines, eyes sharp as winter sky. He spoke in Lakota first, then English. This land marked by Treaty 1868, Frozen Creek boundary. White law claims it. Old law claims it. We hear truth today. He gestured to Emma. Child speaks first. Treaty honors innocent witness. Emma walked to the center, facing the elders. The creek murmured behind her. A hawk cried overhead. The smell of wet grass and sage smoke hung in the morning air. And Jim Thornton, 45 years old and still learning what it meant to have faith, watched a 9-year-old girl step forward to prove that some truths ran deeper than paper and law and the ambitions of corrupt men. The sun climbed higher. The hearing began. And everything Jim had fought for, everything he had promised that day in the auction house, came down to whether a child's memory could stand against a man's lies. Emma Grace Sullivan stood in the center of the meadow, 40 people watching, 7 elders waiting. 9 years old and the weight of 640 acres pressing down on shoulders too small to carry it. But she stood straight, held that brass compass like it was the last piece of her father left in the world, which maybe it was. I am Emma Grace Sullivan, she said. Her voice was small but steady, carrying across the meadow like water over stones. My papa was Robert Sullivan. He homesteaded 640 acres touching this creek. He taught me the boundary when I was 6 years old. Made me walk it every spring till I could name every marker blind. She pulled out the compass. The brass caught the sunlight, dull and smoke-stained. This was his surveying compass. He used it to map the original claim. Said maps lie, but land does not. She opened it. The needle stuck. She tapped it 3 times. Gentle, like asking, not forcing. The needle released, swung north, settled. He taught me that too. When it sticks, you tap it gentle. 3 times, like you are asking a favor from something that knows more than you do. Rising Hawk nodded. Show us the boundary. Emma led them through the meadow, 40 people following a 9-year-old girl, white ranchers who had known her father. Lakota warriors who knew the land held memory longer than men held grudges. Marcus and his lawyer trailing behind like shadows trying to catch sunlight. She went to the split boulder first, touched the crack where wildflowers grew purple and white pushing through stone. First marker, lightning split it in 76. Papa said you could smell the burn for 3 days after. Said it smelled like the sky was angry. She turned west counting steps under her breath. 50 paces, every step measured like her father had taught her heel to toe, no cheating the distance. Wolf Den Ridge, holes in the hillside where white wolves had raised pups when the territory was still more wild than settled. Eagle's Nest Cottonwood massive against the sky. Spring Seep where water ran clear. Old Ford where the creek used to be shallow. Each marker named and found. Each location exactly where she had said in yesterday's practice walk. The witnesses confirmed it. Same path, same count. No hesitation. Then she reached the lightning-struck pine. 40 feet of dead gray wood, bark stripped by the strike that killed it, standing like a monument to the moment when sky touches earth and leaves its mark forever. Seventh marker, got struck in 77. Papa was here when it happened. Said the crack was loud enough to wake the dead. Said for a moment everything went white and silent, and he thought maybe God had spoken. Marcus's lawyer stepped forward. Buckley, slick-suited city-educated, the kind of man who believed paper trumped truth every time. The child's memory is impressive, but memory is not evidence. I have here the official county survey filed and notarized showing the boundary following Frozen Creek as it currently runs. He pulled out Marcus's deed, unrolled it with a flourish. The creek moved, Emma said. Buckley smiled, patient, like he was talking to a slow child who needed things explained simple. Creeks do not move, young lady. They may flood, but the channel remains. Spring of 80, 3 weeks of rain, creek cut a new channel 30 yards east of where it used to run. Emma turned to the elders. Treaty markers follow the old creek, not the new one. She led them to where the old channel had been. The grass-covered depression, still visible once you knew to look. The earth shaped by water that had abandoned this path years ago, and there 30 yards from the current creek half buried in spring grass, the three-stone cairn. Cairn is here, Emma said. But the spring runoff had been heavy. The creek had risen. Water now covered what had been dry land yesterday. To reach the cairn, Emma would have to wade into knee-deep water. Fast current, cold enough to steal breath and feeling. Everyone watching, Marcus smiling because surely a 9-year-old girl would turn back now. Emma did not hesitate. She stepped into the creek. The cold hit her like a fist. She gasped but kept going, water to her knees, then her thighs, current pushing hard, trying to sweep her downstream. Jim started forward. Daniel stopped him. She has got to do this herself. Emma reached the cairn, water swirling around her, soaking her dress, turning her lips blue. She lifted the bottom stone with both hands, struggling with the weight, with the cold making her fingers clumsy. She turned it over. Carved deep into the underside numbers and letters worn but unmistakable, T1 1868. She held it up so everyone could see. Sunlight glinted off wet stone. The crowd went silent. Even the creek seemed to quiet, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Treaty marker, 1868, placed on the original creek bank. The creek had moved. The marker had not. Treaty marker, Daniel said quietly, 1868, placed on original creek bank. Creek moved. Marker did not. Emma waded back, shivering violently. Jim wrapped his coat around her. She was soaked through, trembling, but her eyes were fierce. Buckley was staring at the stone like it had appeared from nowhere. Marcus had gone white. Rising Hawk's voice cut through. The Sullivan deed shows boundary where... Buckley unrolled Marcus's deed with hands that shook slightly. The current creek course. But current, not treaty. Rising Hawk pointed at the marker stone Emma still held. Treaty older. Treaty law says boundary follows old creek. This deed, he gestured at Marcus's papers, crosses treaty land, not legal. Marcus's face had drained of color, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. The county survey. County survey, wrong. Rising Hawk stood. The weight of 80 years in the authority of tradition stood with him. Child's memory matches treaty map. Stone proves it. Land itself testifies. A horse approached from the South Trail. Everyone turned. Judge Artemis Cole, 70 years old, white-beard eyes that had seen 40 years of frontier law. The traveling judge delayed and Helena not supposed to arrive for another month. But here he was dismounting slowly, walking to the gathering with the deliberate pace of a man who knew his presence changed everything. "Apologies for my delay," he said, "but I am here now. What have I missed?" Rising Hawk explained. Showed the treaty map, the cairn with 1868 carved deep, Marcus's deed using the new creek course. The judge studied them all. Then he looked at Emma, soaking wet, wrapped in a coat too big, still holding that compass, still standing. "Young lady, you walked this entire boundary from memory." "Yes, sir. Papa taught me." "And this treaty marker was exactly where you said it would be." "Yes, sir." The judge turned to Marcus. "Mr. Sullivan, did you survey this land yourself before filing your deed?" Marcus's mouth opened, closed. No words came. "Because if you had, you would have found that marker, would have known the creek moved, would have known your deed crossed treaty land." The judge paused. "Unless you knew, and filed it anyway." "The railroad?" Marcus's voice cracked. The calm facade shattered. "They gave me $2,000 for the depot rights. I already spent it. If I cannot deliver the land—" He lunged toward Emma, not thinking, just desperate, reached for her like he could somehow force her to sign, make it all go away, turn back time to before the courthouse burned and the ways unraveled. Jim stepped between them, caught Marcus's arm, held him there. "Do not," Jim said quietly. Marcus collapsed, knees hitting mud, hands covering face. "I am ruined. The money is gone. I got nothing. They will send me to prison." Rising Hawk's voice was gentle, almost sad. "You chose lies over truth, paper over land. This is consequence." Judge Cole nodded to Sheriff Hayes, who had been watching from the crowd. "Marcus Sullivan, you are under arrest. Fraud, falsifying county records, conspiracy to commit arson." The sheriff stepped forward with irons. Marcus did not resist, just knelt there in the mud, broken. Everything he had schemed for, lied for, burned a courthouse for gone. "I hereby affirm the tribal council's ruling," Judge Cole announced. "The Sullivan homestead claim is valid under the 1868 treaty. Emma Grace Sullivan is the legal heir. Temporary guardianship to James Thornton made permanent pending formal adoption proceedings." He looked at Emma. "Young lady, that land is yours, 640 acres, free and clear." The meadow erupted, neighbors cheering, Lakota riders calling out in their language, Ruth crying and laughing at the same time. Emma just stood there, compass in hand, shivering, and Jim knelt beside her. "You did it," Emma whispered. "We did it. Papa did it. He taught me so I would remember, even when everything else was gone." The sun broke through clouds, spring warmth on their faces. The creek sang over stones following its new course. But the old course was still there, marked in grass and stone and memory. The land had spoken, and for once someone had listened. The trial happened 3 weeks later. Marcus and his clerk Hoskins both testified, brought to Helena in chains. Hoskins broke first, admitted Marcus paid him $50 to start the courthouse fire. Said Marcus needed the land records destroyed so nobody could prove the creek had moved. Marcus got 5 years at Deer Lodge Prison. Hoskins got 2. The railroad withdrew their depot claim, paid Emma $2,000 in restitution, the exact amount Marcus had taken. The money arrived by bank draft in May. Emma held it like it might catch fire. "That is more money than Papa ever saw in his life," she whispered. "It is your money," Jim said, "for your land, your future." The town held another meeting. Different tone this time. Denton stood first, the man Jim had punched. "I was wrong," his voice carried across the church hall. "Believed Marcus's lies, said things about Mr. Thornton that were not true. I apologize to both of them." 3 other families stood, apologized, said they had been scared of losing the depot, losing jobs. Fear had made them turn on a child. The railroad sent a representative, man in a pressed suit who smelled of pomade and cigars, laid maps on the table. "We still need a depot. Miss Sullivan's land has rail access on the eastern boundary. If she would consider leasing 20 acres for depot construction. Emma looked at Jim. He nodded. Your choice. 200 a year, lease not sale, and half the money goes to town school fund. The railroad man blinked. That is generous. Papa said community takes care of its own. I am part of this community now. Papers were signed. Depot would be built by fall. 50 jobs secured. Relocated half a mile from Marcus's fraudulent claim. Everybody won except the man who tried to steal it all. June came warm and clear. The mud dried to dust. Grass grew thick and green. Calves dropped in the south pasture. 8 healthy births. Emma helped with 3, getting her arms bloody to the elbow, pulling a breech calf that would have died without her. Daniel Whitefeather arrived on the first Saturday of June. He brought 6 tribal elders and enough venison to feed 40 people. They set up in the meadow between the ranch house and the creek, built a ceremonial fire. The smell of sage smoke drifted across the afternoon. Broken arrow ceremony, Daniel explained to the gathered crowd. White and Lakota neighbors, ranchers, townspeople who had stood with them at the hearing. Adoption ritual makes family not by blood, but by witness and choice. He gave Jim an arrow, Ud, marked with symbols Jim did not understand but felt the weight of. He gave Emma an arrow, similar. Break them. Jim snapped his arrow. The crack echoed. Emma broke hers. Small hands, but she managed it. Daniel collected the pieces, wrapped them in buckskin, buried them at the base of the cottonwood. 2 separate, now 1. Earth witnesses, people witness. This is family. Ruth stepped forward with her testimony ledger, open to a clean page. Legal adoption under territorial law. James Thornton adopts Emma Grace Sullivan as daughter and heir. Signed this day, June 7th, 1883. She looked up. Judge Cole left papers. He will file them official when he comes through in August. But in the eyes of everyone here, it is done. 40 people signed as witnesses, each name a promise of protection. When the signing finished, Jim led Emma to the barn. The branding iron was already hot. He had started the fire at dawn. The 3 calves from March were half grown now, bearing the SR mark Emma had put on them herself. 8 new calves waited in the pen. Emma's herd born on her land. Your papa's mark, Jim said, holding up the SR iron, and my ranch name, Thornton Ridge, TR, we combine them. Your legacy and mine, together. Emma branded the first calf with SR. Then Jim showed her how to add TR beside it. Double mark, Sullivan and Thornton, separate but joined. The hide sizzled. Smoke rose, smelling of burnt hair and new grass, and something like hope made solid. They branded all 8. By the end, Emma's arms were shaking. But every mark was clean and true. The smell of cooking meat drew them back to the meadow. Someone had brought a whole hog. Someone else brought 3 pies. Ruth had baked enough bread to feed an army. The Lakota women brought fry bread and wildberry preserves. They ate until the sun dropped behind the western ridge. Children ran through the grass, white and Lakota both, chasing each other, laughing, the sound of it filling the evening like a promise of better days. Emma sat with Jim on the blanket watching them play. Sarah would have been 15 now, Jim said quietly, if she had lived, old enough to help run the ranch, old enough to teach you things I cannot. Like what? Like how to braid your hair proper, which wildflowers make the best dye. Like, he stopped, like being a daughter. I am going to stumble, get it wrong sometimes. You are doing fine so far. Children's laughter carried on the wind. A meadowlark sang from the fence post. Somewhere up the creek, a beaver slapped its tail. Jim reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a small box, worn velvet, inside a ring, plain gold band with a single small stone, blushing as creek water. This was my wife's, her mother's before that. Been in the family 40 years. Sarah was supposed to get it someday. Now it is yours. When you are older, when it fits. Emma took the box like it was made of glass. Opened it. The stone caught the last sunlight glowed. It is beautiful. You are beautiful, and you are mine now, my daughter. His voice broke. Not bought, not paper. Mine because I choose you and you choose me. That is what this ring means, family by choice. Emma closed the box carefully, put it in her pocket next to the compass, Two weights now, past and future, both carried forward. A week later, the new courthouse opened. Smaller than the old one, but built solid. Fireproof vault for the records this time. The county clerk Williams called them in for official registration. Emma Grace Sullivan Thornton, he said, writing in the new ledger. 640 acres. Homestead patent filed 1879, claimed 1883. Legal heir and owner. He blotted the ink, turned the book so they could see. Emma's name in black ink. Permanent. Witnessed. Real. Below it in smaller script, joint management with guardian, James Thornton. Combined holdings 1,120 acres total. Sullivan Homestead plus Thornton Ridge Ranch. Williams looked up. Biggest spread in the county now. You two are ranching partners. Official. They walked to the general store, the same store where Emma had heard whispers months ago. Mrs. Peterson looked up when Emma entered, set down the cloth she was folding, crossed to them. Miss Emma, I owe you an apology. Said things that were not true. Believed lies because I was afraid. She looked at Jim. You are a good man. Anyone can see that now. I am sorry I did not see it sooner. Emma nodded, did not say it was okay because it had not been. But she accepted the words. They bought supplies. Flour, sugar, coffee. 3 bags of seed corn for the new field Emma wanted on the South 40. The storekeeper gave them a discount without being asked. Family rate for the girl who proved truth matters more than paper. That Sunday, they started a new tradition. Dinner after church, 6 families rotating houses. First week at the ranch. 12 adults, 8 children crowded around Jim's table and spilling onto the porch. The sound of forks on plates, conversation, laughter. Emma helped serve, moving between adults with a water pitcher. She stopped behind Jim's chair. Conversations flowed around them. Daniel talking horses, Ruth about a difficult birth, children arguing over the last biscuit. Emma set her hand on Jim's shoulder. Light, tentative. Papa, she said quietly, testing the word. Can you pass the salt? Conversation stopped. Everyone heard it. First time she had called him that. Jim turned, eyes wet, picked up the salt shaker, handed it to her. Here you go, daughter. Conversation started again. But something had shifted. Something had settled. The words spoken, witnessed, made real. After the meal, children ran outside. Emma taught 3 of them how to use the compass, showed them how to tap it when the needle stuck, how to shoot a bearing, how to read the land instead of just walking across it. My papa taught me. Now I am teaching you. That is how it works. Knowledge passes down. Long as someone remembers, it stays alive. The sun set orange and gold. Families packed dishes, called children, headed home in wagons and on horseback. Daniel was last to leave. You did good, both of you. Jim smiled. We stumbled through it. Best kind of family, the kind that stumbles together. Daniel mounted his paint horse. Treaty Council wants to thank Emma. She proved old law still holds. That truth still matters. They are going to gift her a name. Lakota name. Ceremony next month if you will come. We will be there. Daniel rode into the dusk. Jim and Emma stood on the porch watching the last light fade from the western sky. The creek murmured in the distance. A nighthawk called. The smell of grass and sage and home surrounded them. You tired? Jim asked. No. Emma lied. She was exhausted. But the good kind. The kind that came from a full day of living instead of surviving. We got early morning tomorrow. Cattle to move, fence to mend, garden to weed. I know. Gonna be hard work. Every day. For years. I know. Then, but Papa, I am ready for that. Ready to work. Ready to stay. Ready to be your daughter for real. He pulled her close. She fit under his arm, head against his ribs like she had been designed for that exact space. You already are. The old man on the porch in 1903 set down his empty coffee cup. The sun had fully set now. His granddaughter had mastered the compass, could tap it 3 times gentle, and watch the needle settle true. Emma stood, brushed grass from her daughter's dress, looked back at Jim with that smile that still held echoes of the 9-year-old girl who had stood on an auction block and cried that nobody wanted her. You always tell it different, Emma said, because I remember it different each time. Memory is like that. Changes shape depending on the light. But the important parts stay the same. The important parts stay the same. 20 years gone now since that January auction. 20 years since he paid $50 that bought him more than he gave. Emma ran Thornton Ridge with her husband Daniel's nephew. 2 children. Robert named after her father. Sarah named after his daughter. 80 head of cattle. The depot land still leased to the railroad for $200 a year. Still split half with the town school. Whatever happened to Uncle Marcus, the granddaughter asked. Emma and Jim exchanged a glance. He died in Deer Lodge Prison, Jim said quietly. 1891, typhoid. Same sickness that killed Emma's parents. The girl's eyes went wide. The same. We prayed for him, both of us. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Just means you do not let another man's poison kill your own heart. The brass compass sat on Emma's mantle now, worn smooth from 3 generations of hands. Every June, Emma walked the boundary with her children, teaching them the landmarks. 7 markers their great-grandfather had placed. Lightning-struck pine, 3-stone cairn, Wolf Den Ridge, Split Boulder, Eagle's Nest Cottonwood, Spring Seep, Old Ford, land remembered even when people forgot. And family. Family was not blood, not paper. Family was who stood with you when the wind cut deep and the law failed and the whole world said you were not worth saving. Folks still asked why he paid $50 for a child nobody wanted. But Jim Thornton, 65 years old now, and watching his daughter teach her daughter the old ways, knew the answer had never been about the money. That $50 was not a purchase price. It was the cost of redemption. It was the price of becoming, once again, a man who could love something enough to fight for it. A man who could look at a 9-year-old girl on an auction block and see not a burden, but a second chance. Not a problem to solve, but a daughter to raise. Not the end of his story, but a new beginning, written in mud and memory, and the unbreakable truth that land remembers and children never forget the ones who choose them. The compass on Emma's mantle would be passed down again someday. To Robert or Sarah, then to their children, each generation learning to tap it 3 times gentle when the needle stuck. Each generation walking the boundary, counting steps, reading the land instead of trusting paper. Some truths ran deeper than ink and parchment, ran deeper than law and blood and the ambitions of corrupt men. They ran through the earth itself, carved into stone markers and creek beds, and the memory of children who had been taught to see what others missed. And on quiet June evenings, when the light turned golden and the air smelled of cut hay and approaching rain, Jim Thornton would sit on his porch and remember. Remember the cold of that auction house, the weight of that brass compass in a child's trembling hand. The moment he decided that $50 was a small price to pay for the chance to be once more someone's father. Do not mistake what I did for charity, he told his granddaughter as the stars emerged. I needed Emma as much as she needed me, maybe more. She gave me a reason to wake up when grief had hollowed me out, gave me someone to teach what my Sarah never got to learn, maybe gave me a little piece of redemption for the daughter I could not save. Emma came to the porch, stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, the way she had that first Sunday dinner when she called him Papa and made it real. We saved each other, she said simply, and that was the truest thing, the thing he would carry to his own grave someday. Not that he had rescued a child from an auction block, but that she had rescued him from something far worse, the slow death of a man who had stopped believing his life could matter, the prison of grief colder and darker than any Montana winter. The girl nobody wanted had become the daughter everyone knew. The land everyone thought would be stolen had become a legacy that would outlast them all. And the man who thought his story had ended 7 years before in a locked room with a daughter's empty bed had learned that some endings were only beginnings in disguise. Come on, Emma said to her daughter. Time to get you home. School tomorrow. The little girl clutched the compass. Can I keep practicing? Every day, just like great-grandpa taught me. They walked to the wagon. Emma's husband waited patient as the land itself. They drove off into the gathering dark, the sound of wheels and hooves fading until only the creek remained murmuring its eternal song. Jim sat alone on the porch, not lonely, never lonely anymore. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that came from a life well lived, from promises kept, from the knowledge that when his time came, he would leave behind more than he had been given. Somewhere up the ridge, a wolf howled. The same ridge where Marcus had watched with his spyglass all those years ago. But Marcus was gone now, buried in prison ground far from the land he had coveted. And the land remained. The creek flowed, the marker stood, the compass pointed north. And a man who had once believed he had nothing left to give had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts came in the smallest packages. 9 years old, holding a brass compass, crying that nobody wanted her. He had wanted her. Wanted her then, wanted her still. Would want her until the day he died and beyond, if love could reach past the grave the way land remembered past the seasons. $50, the best money he ever spent. The only money that ever bought him back his soul. Jim closed his eyes. The night breeze carried the smell of sage and home, carried the sound of Emma's wagon fading into distance, carried the weight of years and the lightness of grace. And in his mind, he was 45 again, standing in an auction house, hearing a child cry, making a choice, speaking words that would change everything. $50 cash, the price of family, the cost of love, the value of a second chance. He would pay it again, 1,000 times, 1,000,000, whatever the cost, because some things once found were worth more than all the money in all the banks in all the territory, worth more than land or cattle or the security of a life lived safe and small, worth everything, worth the risk of loving again, of losing again, of standing in the fire and hoping you came out whole on the other side. The porch creaked beneath him. The stars wheeled overhead. The land remembered. And Jim Thornton, father twice over blessed beyond measure, let the darkness take him gently toward sleep. Tomorrow there would be work, cattle to move, fence to mend, the endless labor of a ranch that never stopped needing attention. But tonight there was only this, the weight of memory, the gift of family, the knowledge that he had stood at a crossroads and chosen right. Not perfectly, not without stumbling, but right. And in the end, that was all any man could hope for. To choose right when it mattered, to stand firm when easier paths beckoned, to love when love had failed him before, to pay $50 for a child nobody wanted, and to discover in the paying that he was the one who had been purchased, redeemed, saved, by a 9-year-old girl with a brass compass and a memory full of landmarks and the kind of courage that came from having nothing left to lose. She had taught him to read the land again, to trust that truth ran deeper than paper, to believe that some promises once made could never be broken. And that was worth more than $50. Worth more than anything. Worth everything he had, everything he was, everything he would ever be. The girl nobody wanted had saved them all, and the land patient and eternal remembered.